Artificial intelligence is the ability of computer systems to simulate or to replicate human intelligence. You will find this definition in some places, and it can be at the same time something very interesting, very promising. It can also look quite scary. We have a panel today of experts in different aspects of artificial intelligence or artificial intelligence enforcement. So I will start on my right with Bryce Alibert. He was appointed in 2022 head of unit in antitrust, IT, internet and consumer electronics at DigiComp. He holds a degree in engineering and a PhD in mathematics from the École Polytechnique of Paris. And before joining the DigiComp unit in 2000, he was a specialist of aircraft electromagnetics in the French Minister of Defense. He was first a case handler in the unit in charge of control of state aid for research and development and to the energy sector, and then moved to his current unit in 2007. We have Gerard Jimenez Atsuar, my far left. He's economist and data scientist. He has accumulated experience in building machine learning applications, working mainly in the healthcare and financial sectors. Lately, he has been focusing on applying statistical and machine learning for bidding detection in the public procurement process at the Catalan Competition Authority, ACO. I have to explain that in Spain we have the national authority, that is also the international authority, and we have several authorities in the different regions which take up all the cases that do not exceed their territory. The landscape in Spain is more complex because you have several authorities that have also the council that is taking the final decision. Some other territories have decided only to have a body to investigate, and then the cases are brought to the council of the CNMC. And then there are still regions that have decided not to have a specific authority in their territory, and those cases, even if they are regional in scope, are done by the CNMC itself. So like, you understand how things work. Then we have Martin Huber, professor in the economics department, University of Freiburg, Switzerland. He earned his PhD in economics and finance, specializing in econometrics at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland in 2010. He conducted a visiting fellowship at Harvard University, and since 2014 he assumed the role of Professor of Applied Economics and Policy Evaluation at the University of Freiburg. He's a researcher focusing on database methodologies, and one of his areas of expertise is the development of artificial intelligence algorithms to identify bid rigging cartels in public tenders by scrutinizing suspicious pricing patterns among bidders. And finally, we have Manuel García Rodríguez. He's a telecommunications engineer, master in project management, and a PhD from the University of Oviedo, with a thesis on data analysis and public procurement, applying big data and artificial intelligence. The European Commission included him on its list of experts in public procurement, and he has been awarded for his contributions to the European Commission and public administrations from Spain. He has 14, sorry. I don't think he has 40 years all in all. He has 14 years of work experience in the private sector. Currently, he works at the consulting firm NTT Data in the business analytics department as a data engineer developing projects of public bodies, including the Spanish National Markets and Competition Commission. And myself, I am Marisa Tierno. I am Director General for Competition at the Spanish Competition Authority. I am also an official on leave from the European Commission, where I have worked for 20 years. And before that, I was an official of the Dutch Competition Authority. And before that, I was in private practice. So I think you spot that the deviation is me. I am the odd member of this panel because all the rest are scientists and I am the only lawyer. So It also means that I feel my duty to the public of non-scientists to explain very briefly a few concepts that they are going to use maybe constantly through the discussion, especially in the second part of the discussions. So I was explaining a bit that artificial intelligence is this ability of computer systems to replicate or simulate human intelligence. More concretely, what does it mean? So it means that some of these applications or systems may reason, may make decisions, may analyze data, may recognize speech, recognize faces, recognize patterns, deviations, may generate, some of them, written or oral content, may steer a car. All those things are artificial intelligence. And there are three concepts that I would like to define, probably very roughly and not accurately enough as they would do, but just for people out of the street to understand what is going to be discussed. First thing is the machine learning that you are going to learn to hear a lot. So computers learning from their experiences without human help. That is machine learning. So they use algorithms to learn. They are trained on data sets, which are fed by data science, data mining, and there you have machine learning. There is one part of machine learning that is deep learning. So it is the learning and improving on their own, the computers, the machines, the programs, examining computer algorithms. And then they work replicating or trying to replicate as an inspiration our neuronal networks. So they create and they use artificial neuronal networks that imitate human responses. One of these things would be, for instance, face recognition. And then you have natural language processing, and this is the ability of machines to learn human language, to use it, and to translate it. You know that lately there has been this situation in which computers have been able to translate very ancient documents of languages that had been lost and that could not be read, and then there have been computers able to read these ancient documents. Okay, so this is a way to introduce some of the concepts. Before we get into programming and these technicalities, the issue is that we have companies that are in this world that are specialized and that we have to monitor. As enforcers, we care about what they are doing, their abilities. And then I'm going to turn first to Bryce so that he gives us an introduction to the state of competition in artificial intelligence sector.
Thanks a lot, Marisa. Thank you for having me. I'm going to give a little introduction indeed on what we do to monitor the AI sector. The AI is, of course, a big term. It includes many things. It is a tool, of course, that can be used, as we will see, in a pro-competitive or an anti-competitive way. But before all, it is an industry. It's an industry that's wide, which includes several branches, and one of the most topical ones that has given rise to a lot of discussions recently is generative AI. So generative AI is really the neural networks that replicate writing or create images. So we're just really speaking about models that predict the next words, but they do it in such an accurate way that they can actually talk to people. Of course, this can create a lot of changes in the economy because many of the things that used to be done by humans can now be done by machines, and you can expect that the whole industry will develop around that. And that's indeed what we observe. And as a competition authority, of course, we have to be sure that this industry that's very vibrant, that's very dynamic, doesn't give rise to anti-competitive issues. Now, if I have a look a little bit at what are we speaking about in terms of companies, I'm focusing on generative AI there. We are talking about first there's the classical ones, the GAFAMs that we've all heard a lot about this morning. OpenAI is not really a GAFAM, but it's collaborating closely with Microsoft. Everyone knows ChatGPT. GPT-4 is essentially their main model. And then there's Google with Bard, and then there is Facebook or Meta with Llama. Now, these companies, of course, have a big role to play, but they are not the only ones. What we observe is that there are other new entrants in this industry from a bit everywhere. There are, of course, US new entrants. Probably the best known is Anthropic. They have a machine learning model called Claude. I don't know why, by the way. I don't know what's the inspiration, but they call it that way. But we also have a lot of European startups that are entering this field, and sometimes they are entering big. They are creating their own large language models. For instance, there's Aleph Alpha in Germany. There's Stability in the UK, but that's effectively using an algorithm that's been made in Munich in Germany. And in France, there's Mistral AI. So these companies enter this very dynamic field, and they try to confront the big GAFAMs. And this is all fine. I think this is what we hope an industry to be, which is small companies, new entrants, innovators from everywhere, market economies trying to challenge the big tech companies. So what we have to be aware of is we have to ensure that it continues that way. And this morning we heard Massimo explain us that maybe in the past we've been a bit slow. That Article 102, he said, was a bit slow at certain points. He mentioned the Google shopping case. I was a lot involved in that case, so I was there at the beginning, I was there at the end, and I know there is a long time between the beginning and the end. So perhaps this time all together as competition authorities, we can try to be a bit more on the ball and observe from the outset if there are difficulties. Now, this is not to say that there will necessarily be issues, because not all industries, as again Massimo also explained, not all industries have the same features, not even all digital industries. Sometimes there are digital industries where everything goes well, for instance, because some of the features that are prone to lock-in don't exist in these industries. So we have to observe whether in the field of AI, there are the same kind or not, whether there are the same kind of patterns that we observed in other digital contexts. This is only a work that's beginning, but we can already observe three main themes that could potentially give rise to difficulties. The three main inputs that are necessary for big machine learning models to operate in an effective manner. The first one is computing power. So the first thing one has to do to have a machine learning model that works is to train it. It starts knowing nothing, and in the end, it must be able to speak in any language, including lost languages, apparently. So for that, you have to train the model with a lot of computation power, supercomputers generally, and we know that this computing power generally relies on special types of chips, the chips that had been used in the past for video gaming. Now, we suddenly realize that these video gaming chips, which used to be a very niche market for geeks like me, they become actually very important for a whole industry, and they are choke points. So there is this first thing that we have to monitor, which is the market going to have the sufficient dynamism, sufficient competitiveness to ensure that everyone that is in need has the possibility to access this computing power. Second essential input, if I may say, is data. Data is what effectively trains the model. You have to have the computing power, but you also need to have the data. And there, already we can observe that some of the big tech are trying to lock in some of their data. We've all heard about, what's its name now? Not Twitter, but X. I think they've decided that they would no longer share the data of Twitter with anyone else so that they can produce their own large language model. And of course, all the interactions on Twitter are a very important source of human interactions, very important source of data that can be used to train large language models. Now, is that a problem? Really, we don't yet know. Maybe there are open source types of data or data that are publicly available against a license that can be good enough to produce the same efficiency in terms of machine learning. We've seen some of these startups that have created pretty good LLMs based on allegedly open source models, but we have also seen that the bigger ones, OpenAI's GPT-4 or Google's Bard, nobody knows what they've been trained on, and certainly not based on public data. So there's this second potential choke point, that we have to check. And the third one is the access to the cloud. Because many of these AI models actually cannot run locally. Not all of them. There are now new ones which potentially can work with if you have a good computer with a big video gaming chip, but not everyone has a video gaming chip in their computer, and it certainly doesn't fit on this device. So you would really need to have access to the cloud just to run the system. And of course, there we know that in the cloud there are a few big players. And these big players could potentially, I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but they could have the temptation to say, oh, well, I'm reserving that cloud access to myself, to my AI tools, and therefore only if you use my cloud system, then you will be able to use my AI tools. So these three elements put together create the potential, not necessarily an outcome, but a potential that some of the things, that there could be some anti-competitive issues. And what kind of anti-competitive issues are we talking about? It's the classical ones, at least the ones we can think of now. The type of leveraging, for instance. You could imagine that, for instance, not imagining, but you could imagine that one of the GAFAM says, well, I'm strong in, say, search, and therefore I'm going to tie my AI system to my search engine. Perhaps it's no problem, perhaps it is. We've seen instances in the past where it is a problem. There can be all sorts of favoring. You could have a cloud company that says, okay, I'll give access to different types of AI systems to my cloud facilities, but my own will have a better access, it will have a better throughput, or it will have better APIs. We've seen this kind of favoring happening also in the past, and this can also create problems. You can have also essential facilities issues. We've discussed three important inputs. There can be other inputs that are monopolized, and for which, for instance, I mean, just going again to the question of the cloud, the dominant company could say, well, I'm just not giving you access to my cloud at all. Or taking the case of Twitter, probably not the dominant company, but let's assume they could say, oh, all my data, I'm not going to give that access to you, so you can't use it, and that's an essential facility that could be withdrawn. And finally, we could imagine other types of problems, such as companies that run an AI system, that elaborate an ecosystem around it, application developers, for instance, or companies that use the AI system, and then impose unfair trading conditions, such as you have to let me use all your data if you want to run my AI system. Again, this is not necessarily a competition issue in the first place, but this is the kind of terms and conditions that we have to be very critically looking at to see if they create competition issues. So that's my brief overlook at the industry. Of course, we are just monitoring at present. It's not that we have a case or anything. This is something I know other competition authorities are looking at. I've heard of projects in at least three, Denmark, Germany, and Portugal, more or less advanced. I'm sure there are others. But I would say as an entity, as a network of competition authorities, this is something we are looking at.
Thank you very much. Bryce is in charge of competition enforcement, on a very new area, but the old good competition enforcement. What I mean is that he's not dealing with the DMA as the colleagues who were in the panel previously. So, I wanted to say that in the digital industry, the CNMC has had and has several cases lately. One decision is of this year concerning Apple and Amazon, and we have ongoing investigations. I can say it because we have initiated proceedings, and then that is public, regarding Booking and Google. But I wanted to say just a few words, not to take time from the rest of the panelists, regarding a case of ours that is PropTech. PropTech is a case, the decision dates from the end of 2021. And it regards 7 firms, including 2 real estate franchisors and several IT companies, which were fined for entering into brokerage price fixing, setting minimum fees, and information sharing agreements. And why do I bring it up in a digital environment? It was because this collusion was the will of human, but was made possible and was compounded by the use of computers to execute that will of humans. So in some taxonomies, you would say that that is a computer as a messenger. There is, before I say a few words on the case, what I wanted to say is that the traditional economic theory would have not predicted that there would be a collusion in this field. Why? Because we are speaking about thousands of companies. You know, there is no traditional economy that would predict collusion of 1,000 companies. But it was possible because of this computer system. So it means that the use of these kind of systems can make a collusion possible where it wouldn't be possible otherwise, or can take it to another level, can make it pervasive. And then the question is whether we would be able also to, you know, find out about this kind of patterns. So this case started ex officio at the end of 2019, and we had a price fix at the bottom of it was a price fixing agreement for online intermediation state, and then what they had was a multiple listing service consisting of a database in which the real estate brokers and agencies were sharing the property listings and the sales, and so it was a pool which had a fee, it had a distributing fee, but when one of the companies was obtaining a client, then it had to pay a fee to the, you know, another one could pick it, and then it had to pay a fee to the member that had actually made the catching of the client if it made the final sale. There was a minimum commission of 4% on sales and rentals, and there was information exchange on the fees. So it was not the fact that they had the information that made possible, you know, to work. It was the fact that they had a minimum commission, and then the system, the informatics, made it impossible to upload properties when the actual fee that had to be inserted was above 4%. So it was impossible then to work in that system. And then there were monetary fines, and there was a possibility to exclude them from the system that was essential to function. Okay, so this would be a way of enabling collusion through informatics. It is different from other roles of software that we are fearing for the future. But now passing from that to the other side of the panel, what I wanted to share is that at the CNMC, one of our top priorities is certainly adapting our competition enforcement to the current wave of digitalization as a matter of substance, but also to be able to uncover collusion using artificial intelligence tools. So to use the same tools that they have at the other side in order to do this. We have a record of 70% on average since 2018 of cases that are ex officio in the cartel field, which I think is quite respectable. 2018 is the year of the creation of the Economic Intelligence Unit. And I have there the head of the Economic Intelligence Unit and the person who is in charge of the program I will explain later on. And one of our top priorities has been to integrate people of different profiles that are not only lawyers, not only economists, but also scientific scientists and mathematicians. And, you know, we have an aeronautical engineer, I think, as well. So we have all kind of people. So this means that we are going to discuss artificial intelligence for detection. And then I wanted to ask from the different approaches, what artificial intelligence tools or developments do you think would be the most appropriate to boost collusion detection? And especially because that is where we are, I think, focusing related to public procurement data. And I would like colleagues to explain advances in collusion detection. So I start with Martin Huber.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. And as we have already heard before from Brice, one of the bases of artificial intelligence for developing tools to detect collusion is having good data, right? If I have rubbish data, then I also will have a method which will not work well. And so therefore, high data quality is key. And what that also means is that we should have standardized data to a larger extent. Data that can be easily transferred then into machine-readable formats. So I think we have seen across Europe, but also across the world, some advancements in having more standardization in terms of the data. But standardization is not the only thing. Also, the relevant information must be in there, right? So many of these new tools, in order to detect collusion, they actually depend on information about bids in tenders, right? So we would need to have data where actually such bids are included, because many of these tools try to distinguish cartels and competitive tenders based on specific patterns that we see in the bids. So for example, one thing that is very often observed in the construction sector is that if there is collusion going on, then the lowest bid and the second lowest bid are rather far from each other, right? So the cartel wants to make sure that the one with the lowest bid actually wins the contract. So you have a huge gap. And then among the remaining bids, you very often have way less differences. So we say that there we have a smaller variance, so a smaller price variation, right? And algorithms can learn from these differences in the patterns or distribution of bids. This is one kind of method that has been developed in the past, one of these machine learning methods that have been mentioned. And that, of course, requires that we have this information available, that we can make the price distribution available to the departments that now use these machine learning tools to detect collusion. The case I've already mentioned right now, these machine learning tools which learn from the price patterns of cartels and from the price patterns that occur under competition, for these methods, we also need to have past cases where some cartels have been detected and have been sentenced, right? So this is another data requirement that we have. There must be information available about past cartels that have been dismantled and where we know from the legal process when the cartel has actually started and when the cartel has ended, because then we can actually distinguish, right, these periods with and without cartels to make the algorithm learn from the differences in the prices of both periods, right? Okay, this is another way where we should advance and where we have advanced in the past. That is, we should collect more data on past cases, and we should collect more data on different industries, right? Not only the construction sector, not only one certain industry. We should have ideally cases from many different industries. Because one risk with these new methods of artificial intelligence is that if we feed them with data from one specific industry, they only learn for this specific industry. And I myself, with colleagues from the Swiss competition agency, we have actually investigated whether if we train algorithms in one country, whether that also works well to detect cartels in another country. And there we clearly, or in a different industry even, and there we clearly need to say actually that the results are mixed. Sometimes it works surprisingly well, but sometimes it works less well. And that means we need to have a better database for the future, to have models that work better in different contexts. And in general, we always have the threat that a model that worked well in the past will not work that well in the future anymore, because these models are always trained on the past, right? They can only learn from past patterns. If, for example, cartels adjust their behavior, then it might be that the price patterns that were indicative in the past are not indicative anymore in newer cartels. And so therefore, this entire process of data acquisition needs to be permanently repeated, actually, such that we always have rather actual data to retrain the algorithms, right? We can also retrain models. So this is the big advantage of these artificial intelligence methods when compared to statistical or classical statistical methods. In classical statistical methods, or also in economic models, we set up the model for once, and then we stick to this model forever, right? And we don't know, is this this method the best one, or is it not the best one? Because it is not developed in a way that it works best in the data. The difference with artificial intelligence is it's also based on statistics, but it tries many, many different statistical models. It's an evolutionary process, like trial and error. I don't know what works best in the beginning. I just try a bunch of different things, and then the data speak to me and tell me which model works best. And this process I can actually repeat over and over again, and I think this is sort of the direction where we should head. Very briefly, I also want to just give you a couple of examples to which kind of tenders these methods have been adapted to right now. For example, there are methods which are tailored to detect cartels when really all the cartel members collude based on their pricing patterns, for example. But then there are also other methods which are actually tailored to partial cartels, because it could be in a market that not all companies collude, but only some of them. And then actually the price patterns will not be investigated for all the market members at the same time, but only for a subset in a sequential way, right? So these are some advancements that we have seen. And then the latest advancement is that now, as Brice has already mentioned it before, we now also see these new deep learning algorithms. Deep learning are these algorithms which try to actually mimic neural networks in our brain. And so here, these new algorithms have been applied not only to assess the price distribution in certain tenders, but also to assess the behavior of individual firms across different tenders, right? So bidding behavior of a specific firm in several tenders. And also here, that brings me back to my starting point. In order to do so, we need information, right? So for this last method, we actually would need to know which company actually participated in which tender. And of course, there are legal issues with this, right? Data protection issues. But I think it's still possible to make this information available in an anonymized way first, to, where the companies are actually first kept anonymous to actually detect them, and then the legal case, when it is investigated, can then actually check. If there's one company that looks suspicious, then of course the case can be opened. So this artificial intelligence is always the starting point. It is never that we can, based on the findings of an artificial intelligence method, that we can actually already judge, but at least it allows us to focus our resources to these cases that are suspicious. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Manuel, but I just wanted to say one thing. You were mentioning the need, and we will come to that in other interventions as well, of having the right data. And I was very moved by the confidence you have on the fact that decisions of a competition authority would always know what the truth is. The reality is normally wider than the legal truth. So the fact that you are able to, I mean, sometimes yes, if you are lucky enough to find a cartel that started with a written agreement, but normally you can prove behavior, maybe it started earlier, maybe it finished later, but you cannot be sure about this. So when we are doing this exercise that you are doing, we are being careful about that. So we don't prejudge. Let's say, when we have the part that we have caught, that is collusive. But we don't presume that the part that we haven't caught was not collusive.
Yeah, that's a very important thing you're pointing out, actually. So that's one problem we face in reality, right? So even if we don't find a cartel, there might still be some in there. And at the end of the day, the quality of the algorithm will depend on how good this distinction is really made, and we have to be aware that we make mistakes, and then also the algorithm will not be of the highest quality, but that is, I think, a pill we need to swallow. Still, sometimes, however, it is unlikely that a cartel is immediately in place again when it was just dismantled, right? So I can only say what is done at the Swiss Competition Agency in order to have competitive periods, or where we have a high probability to have competitive periods to train the algorithm, is exactly the period after the cartel was actually sentenced, because then the hope is that they don't immediately start again. But of course, we can never be sure of this. So all these methods have their caveats as well, right?
Thank you. So your turn, Manuel.
First of all, thank you, Marisa, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about competition applying data science and artificial intelligence. I think that it's fundamental for the competition authorities the creation of data-driven tools developing statistical and economic indicators or metrics which can automatically analyze the company's behavior in public procurement. Moreover, if we add the power of artificial intelligence to these data-driven tools, the potentials to monitor markets efficiently is enormous. I have developed academic studies in my PhD about collusion detection using over 10,000 tenders from different countries, demonstrating that the screening variables and machine learning algorithms can help to detect collusions, such as other academic papers, like Martin papers. I love your papers, Martin, and your colleague, David Imhoff. Yes, because you are the pioneers of this topic. This year, my colleagues from the consulting firm Entity Data and I have collaborated in the development of this type of AI tools in a real environment for the Spanish Commission Authority, in particular for the Economic Intelligence Unit, which is the department in charge of applying statistical and artificial intelligence to improve the ex officio detection of anti-competitive practices. The project gets and analyzes millions of Spanish tenders, not thousands, millions of Spanish tenders. And it also combines another data source that I consider very, very important, company data, firm data, from the Spanish official public body called Registro Mercantil. In English, they are called business register. So you know who the winner is, where they are, what business sectors they work in, if they have the same shareholders in other companies or not, and so on. This business data source has not been used in academic literature until now because it's confidential information in most countries, and the researchers cannot access. However, national competition authorities can establish agreements or request such information from their national business registers. We did the implementation of machine learning algorithms capable of analyzing massive amount of public procurement data and company data to identify patterns and anomalies that could indicate collusive behavior. These algorithms can be designed to detect unusual bidding patterns or pricing irregularities between the bidders involved in the tenders. We are very glad with the results, and I suppose that this project opened the door and it will be a success for the Spanish Competition Authority in the near future. And I would like to talk about 3 points that I believe are fundamental to improve the data-driven tools. First point, researchers, practitioners, all of us, should use graphs to analyze collusion. What is graphs? Graphs databases are a type of database that use graphs structures for semantic queries. It's a collection of nodes and edges where each node represents an entity, such as company or a tender, and each edge represents the relationship between two nodes. These databases are designed to prove an efficient way to store and retrieve complex interconnected data. For example, the project that I mentioned before for the Spanish Competition Authority use the graph databases called Neo4j. Second point, the use of natural language processing, NLP, to analyze documents. NLP techniques can be employed to analyze massive textual information, such as emails, budget, offers, contracts, and other tender documentation, to uncover hidden signs of collusion. For example, the competition authorities could automatically check whether the documents sent by the bidders have the same format, or have similar languages, or directly have identical paragraphs. It means it's a tool like ChatGPT that answers those questions. And finally, the third point is the incorporation of new relevant data sources. I think that the integration of new information from multiple sources can improve collusion detection. Data sources like financial reports, financial records, bank transactions, or tax details can give a clear picture of the bidder's behavior. For example, by looking at bank transactions, we can see if any strange money movement are happening that might mean companies are working together in a way they shouldn't be. Companies behave like people. If they know that they are being actively controlled in all their operation by the competition authorities' policies, they will have more honestly, and in the anti-competitive practices will decrease significantly. This is my point of view.
Thank you very much. Since you have explained a lot about our project, there is a part of it that I will not need to explain, and I thank you very much because you do it much better, frankly. And then I turn to Gerard, please.
Thank you very much, Marisa, and thank you for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. So from the Catalan Competition Authority, we are developing the same kind of tools that Manuel just stated. Basically, we want to detect cartels with these intelligent screening tools. The challenge is that data availability is quite limited, at least in the beginning. And we started almost from scratch. So we needed to gather vast amounts of data, and now we're really happy because we have over 250,000 tenders with the bids for each of those, so that we can apply sophisticated algorithms such as the ones developed by Martin Huber, which is it's just perfect that we are able to kind of apply these cutting-edge tools coming from a relatively small competition authority. So our battle getting data stems from the fact that we are still using PDFs a lot, and PDFs are not structured data. We need Excel files, and we need something even better, but Excel files are enough at this point. So when developing this tool, we also had in mind that professionals at the Catalan Competition Authority wanted them to use it like easily. So I thought that a web-based tool was the best, so that they log in and then they have all the intelligence in there. and also, well, yeah, the main goal is obviously to proactively detect collusion. And the methods that we used in the beginning, since we didn't have a labeled data set. By labeled, I mean what Martin and my colleagues have been explaining before. We don't have historical examples here in Catalonia, like, okay, this market operated in collusion, the exact bids for those tenders were exactly that. We don't have this. We need to build this data set from scratch again. So once we have a labeled data set, examples either from competition and collusion, then we can build our own model. Right now we're using data from Switzerland, from Japan, for example, from Italy, to train these models, but in-house, right now we could not do it. So in the beginning, what did we try to do? We tried to do another approach, which is models can be supervised or unsupervised. Unsupervised learning means that you kind of see the data set and you try to create groups, companies that are operating in a similar fashion, we could say. And then you can tweak the parameters that you want to detect. So for example, we were searching for companies that were bidding against each other very frequently. We were searching for companies where the discount rates were kind of low, where the variance between the bids was relatively low, where the distance between the first and the second best bids was really high. These are the so-called statistical methods, and to some extent it is successful. But of course it's not enough. And I think the current developments hold immense promise. We're really excited to be participating in all this. It's true that this seems very exciting, maybe from the outside, but from the inside, we're just mainly cleaning data, doing this arduous work, so it's not so sophisticated. But in the end, a model is as good as the data that you've used to train it on. The intelligence doesn't come out of nowhere. So we're just really focused on that, and I think this is it.
Thank you very much. The other way around. Thank you very much. You see how interesting it is what we are doing. So I wanted to go now to what we are. I mean, partly it has already been, but we have continued after your project. We have continued inside the economic intelligence unit. But before I explain that, I want to give the word to Bryce to know whether he wants to add something on this point from the perspective of the European Commission.
No. I mean, on the point we just discussed, I think all I can say is this is all interesting. This is all things we are following. Of course, there's a lot to work on still with the help of all these experts. If the question is more what are we using in-house as regards the detection of collusion, it's a bit less my specialty, but I think it's fair to say that we still use a bit of the old-fashioned style. We still have leniency, we still have whistleblowers. But of course, we also have an internal unit that's dedicated to this kind of reflection, a unit that grew from our forensic IT team, but that has grown by adding new capacities, new skills, data scientists, specialists of public procurement, and precisely trying to garner the use of these kind of tools to detect better collusive activities. And this unit not only has grown, but now it's been transferred into a chief technology officer unit, so even a bigger one, where the idea is to try to put together even more experts to not only detect more easily collusive activities, but also help the whole DG when it comes to technical matters. So we'll discuss a little bit unilateral conducts later, but the idea is to try to use all this knowledge that exists, that still has to be developed in the universities and by experts, but to try to combine all of this to our benefit.
Thank you very much. But then I will speak a bit on the CNMC's progress. You have heard me other times explaining indeed that we have a data set that, as has been explained by Gerard, has this problem that, from 2018, this is the first thing. From 2018, apart from having our unit, there was the obligation in Spain to make public tenders in electronic format. And that meant that it was a possibility to get data. But, as has been mentioned, the data were not necessarily structured, because the aim of this was to have the winner. So it is very easy, well, not so easy, they tell me, but okay, you can find the winner in the public databases and even the bid that has won. But of course, when you want to study collusion, you want to know what were the losers, which were the losers and what were the losing bids, because otherwise you cannot establish patterns and you cannot see whether the same companies are competing in a certain way or not. And as was mentioned, some of them were in PDF, some of them were in very strange formats. So the first thing that was developed for us was a way to, one, clean the data. So we have our own database that is clean from mistakes, because also there are mistakes in the name of companies and things like that. So it was an impressive work. Since I haven't done it personally, I can say it for my team, to clean that and to have a data set that would have all the tenders from the autonomous communities and the state with us. And then to be able also to get at the beginning on our own resources to get access to these losing bits before they were made available to us in other formats. So we had to devise the means to be able to read all the different documents in different formats and structure that information so that it would be readable and you could process them. Now, through natural language processing algorithms and regular expressions, we were able to do that. And then we were able then to use artificial intelligence tools for detection ex officio. So that is where we got the help from Manuel. We have limited resources. I mean, they are wonderful, but they are just a few. And then we really needed the help from Manuel to start developing a system. What we have done after that, I'm not going to repeat what he has already mentioned, is that, and that was something that for me was moving when I got the presentation by Susana and Alfonso, who are sitting there, on a new tool that we have almost ready, which would be, in principle, should be able to make real ex officio detection possible. True when we say that we have 70% of ex officio, what we mean is that it doesn't come from leniency. Mm-hmm. But of course, you have a whistleblower, you have a lead, you have something in the press, you have a reason to believe that there is something to look into. But this is a question of having learned from the data sets that are made there in the past, from being able to predict what would be, in principle, the results. So there is a set of data that are used in order to make the machine learn and improve and repeat all these times that they need to actually get things right. And then there is a data set of this past in which you test the results to see whether the predictions would be correct. And then our predictions are being correct in line with the literature, so what you would expect. And then when you look into sectors, you also find, the machine, let's say, finds also things that look logical depending on the sectors. So we are still not done. We are still doing this, but the fact that our results, having been tested, 1,000 times, are are correct or seem to be correct is something that for us we think is a breakthrough, and is one of the flagship projects, if not the flagship projects of the Directorate for Competition, because we are in charge of investigating conducts. So that is what I wanted to share. I can tell you that as somebody who has been, in competition for, I am not going to say how long because it's too long, the fact that you get to see these results was really moving for me. So there you go. I think that we need to look ahead. We still have time, no? Yes. We still have time. Then this is very good, because we need to see from the point of view of the academia which actions or collaborations would be positive in order to advance these artificial intelligence investigations. So what do you have in mind? What is it that you can help us with? How do we go further? I would like to ask this first to Manuel and then to Martin.
Academia plays a crucial role in advancing the field of collusion detection through research, knowledge dissemination, and collaborative partnership with competition authorities and stakeholders. To foster progress in this domain, the universities should prioritize interdisciplinary research initiatives that bring together experts from diverse fields such as economics, mathematics, computer science, law, of course, data science, and so on. By conducting empirical studies and experiments, the research can contribute valuable insights into the behavioral patterns and economic mechanisms underlying collusive practices, thereby enabling the development of more effective detection methodologies and prevention strategies. Moreover, the academia can actively engage in capacity building activities by organizing specialized training programs and workshops aimed at enhancing the technical skills and expertise of competition authorities in leveraging advanced AI tools and analytical techniques for collusion detection. The European Commission knows that this is very important to share information. It means open data related to public procurement, and also collaboration between different stakeholders, such as researchers, public bodies, companies, journalists, citizens. For these reasons, one of the objectives of the project called Public Procurement Data Space, PPDS, is to promote a common data space in Europe accessible to the member states and stakeholders. I would recommend that the competition authorities join to this project, which has been launched this year by the European Commission, and it's being developed by Entity Data.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Yeah, so from my side, I can only say that the practical knowledge, right, which comes out of the competition agencies, combined with the research approach in academia that we sometimes have in academia, can actually be very fruitful for the further development of these new methods. I just wanted to give you one example. So David Imhoff, he's one of the, he's the data scientist, I would say, in the Swiss competition agency. And I think in 2017 or something, we had a meeting together, and he talked to me and he told me, we have these screens here. Screens are tools for benchmarking, right? So we have screens, and based on these screens, we benchmark whether we think there's collusion going on or not. So for example, if the price difference between the lowest bid and the second lowest bid is higher than some threshold, you know, then the red light or the red flag goes on, or if the variance, so the differences in the prices across the losing bids are too small. So this is what we already use. Can we do anything better with this? And it was not that I was very smart or very in the front when I just made the suggestion, well, we can just combine it with machine learning, because machine learning will learn which screen works best for which industry, right? And so we just combined this practical problem and the knowledge that is already there with maybe a different approach of dealing with the problem, in this case based on machine learning. And so we came up with this method that we developed together. And I think this is very important. So the competition agency has, for example, the data, or works with the data, improves the data. And the academics don't have this, but the academics maybe have some idea of how we can use this to improve the methods. And also here I must say very often the academics tend to focus things that they find most interesting, and that's not necessarily the thing that is practically most relevant, right? So I was super happy to get the opportunity to work on these supervised machine learning tools with the Swiss Competition Agency, where we need these labeled data, as Gerard has mentioned it, where we need to have past cases of cartels and competition. But as we have also discussed today, very often we don't have this information, right? And then, even though I find this interesting as an academic to work on the other methods, we need to also work on other methods which are practically usable, right? So for example, as has been mentioned, I think also by Gerard and Manuel before, instead of training algorithms based on cartel data, we should maybe use unsupervised machine learning. And unsupervised machine learning is not about distinguishing cartels and competition. It is about finding outliers, right? So I don't know in my data set what is a cartel and what is not a cartel in terms of the bits that I have. But maybe there are some weird outliers, right? For example, in case of a tender where the lowest and the second lowest bid are very far apart. And so these unsupervised methods, they detect these outliers. And that's one method that is actually practically implementable way more easily because you don't need these past cartel data. And also here, I think the collaboration can be fruitful because what we can now do with past data is we can check how well these unsupervised methods work also in data where we know whether a cartel was in place, right? So this is something we maybe need to bear in mind for the future as possible collaborations between the competition agencies and academics. Just check, okay, if we cannot use the supervised machine learning data, we still have past data where we can check whether the other method also works well, which detects outliers, okay? So this are just some comments, thanks.
Thank you very much. I want to turn to Gerard to comment on everything we have said up to now, so both on the issue of what the competition authority should be doing and on the relationship with the academia, because I think you are well placed to do this.
Yeah, I mean, everything has already been said, I would say. Yeah, I also, now listening to Martin, I was thinking, okay, let's get to work. There's a lot of things to be done and tested, and I think collaboration is absolutely key to develop this field because it's relatively new. And I think we are so grateful by the fact that, for example, papers share their code so that small agencies such as ours can replicate what they have. This is, I think, it's a super important contribution that academia is doing continuously and sometimes without much recognition. So I think we should spend some time recognizing that. And also in terms of agencies, I think we should collaborate much more because we're dealing with the same problems mainly. And if AI is teaching us something, is that the more data you have, the better the model, especially if the quality is high. So if we get a really, really big data set, then we can enforce competition law better. So, yeah, we just...
Thank you very much. So what we are doing is trying to detect. Of course, we still have to prove. I mean, you still have to look at issues. You still have to prove. You still need a judge to give you a warrant for a downgrade. So let's say that it is not as easy. Even if you have good reasons to suspect something, you still have to translate it into a legal language that would make sense. And you would also need, I suppose, to talk to judges so that they would understand this new reality and that they would be able to allow us to get into these don't rates once you have sufficient elements. So it is not so easy. It's a breakthrough, but it is just the starting point, just to put things a bit in, in perspective. Now, so as competition authorities, we need indeed to prove things. We need to address them. We need to think about remedies in this area at some point, which are not only fines, but it could be, which kind of remedies would be interesting in this area. So there is a lot to think about for the future. But I would want to come also, because we discuss cartels and we discuss public procurement, because that is a field on which we are very active with these tools ourselves. But of course, this is not the only area in which artificial intelligence is relevant. And there is still one point I would like to address briefly in this panel, which is how do we address other antitrust infringements, such as abuse of dominance or other things, when they would be using. I mean, I gave an example of a simple system in one of our cases, but how do we, can we have your thoughts about detecting this? If you have an algorithm that is making possible something that would be an abuse of dominance, would there ever be a way to detect it? Do we need to put regulation? Do we need to oblige companies to use systems in which they would have everything documented, that they are able to explain everything the algorithm is likely to do or can potentially do, so that we can understand it? Because, how far can you read the algorithm that somebody else has made without its own help? And I would like, well, let's start with Manuel.
Before we talk about creating algorithms to detect collusions, but we have to be realistic, and this technology can be used to set prices or avoid being detected anti-competitive actions. Calvano et al. Is a famous paper published last year where they have provided the most convincing evidence to date for autonomous algorithm collusions without human instructions or explicit communication. In a nutshell, using computer simulations, the authors constructed a pricing algorithm using a standard reinforcement learning, and the algorithm learns to set supra-competitive prices. It means artificial extra profits. Algorithmic collusions is an emerging concept in the field of antitrust regulation, necessitating the adoption of innovative developments to effectively address such complex challenges. One crucial aspect involves the advancement of explainable AI methodologies, which aim to enhance the interpretability of algorithmic decisions. I would like to recommend also the article titled, What Do We Know About Algorithmic Collusion Now? New Insights from the Latest Academic Research. The author is Ai Deng, and this paper was published last month. Mainly, he discusses three topics: how algorithms affect price. Recent economic literature has revealed complex and yet subtle ways in which pricing algorithms, sometimes with human intervention, impact market prices. One takeaway is that not all mechanisms can be said to be collusive. Second point, the crucial role of algorithmic design. And third point, the consequence of third-party pricing algorithms. Understanding how algorithms make decisions is difficult, but using advanced data analysis, AI-based simulations, and algorithmic auditing frameworks can really help competition authorities figure out how algorithms work. When regulatory groups, tech experts, and academics work together, we can get better at understanding how algorithms make decisions and make strong rules to make sure algorithms follow the fair competition laws. Also, it's important to create a culture of transparency and accountability in the world of algorithms to make sure everyone plays fair. In conclusion, although we are still discovering the implication of AI on competitions, I believe that companies using a price algorithm need to understand what information is provided to the algorithm, what the pricing algorithm does, and how it increases their profitability in their business. If they want to make an artificial extra profit using these pricing algorithms, they should be investigated by the competition authorities, I think.
Thank you very much. So, if you want to say something on this, Bryce.
Yes, maybe a few words based on experience, because it is indeed quite an important topic how we could in the future detect any practice, be it an anti-competitive agreement or even a unilateral practice when it's put in place using not only algorithms but also machine learning. In the past, what we've already seen is that it's very difficult to address issues which are based on complex algorithms. For instance, if I think again about shopping, Google Shopping, or the Amazon case, where we had two findings that the dominant company had been using complex algorithms to favor themselves, it was simply not possible to ask the company to give us the algorithms. We would have had tens of millions of lines of code, of which we wouldn't have been able to make any sense. So we had to rely more on an internal evidence on how the algorithms were functioning based on emails. So already with complex algorithms of I would say the classical type, which is lines of code, it's very complicated for a competition authority to really get into it and understand what is anti-competitive and what's pro-competitive. It's even harder when machine learning models get into play, because the very principle of these machine learning models is that you dump the data in, and the machine figures out by itself what it's doing with it. And I take the example of the screens of Martin. What's wonderful is that the machine learning model managed to find a right way to use the right screen. But I'm sure, well, maybe but I wouldn't be surprised that if I ask you why did it select a given screen, you can't really give a straight answer. That's I know why, and that's why. And we are going to have that problem. But to the 10th power, when big companies come to us and say, I put all the data I have on all my users, everything, I don't really know what the machine did with it, but that's the outcome and I'm happy with it. And if you have a problem with it, competition authority, deal with it. Try to find by yourself why the machine used that data. And I don't have an answer to that question. I think it's a very important one. It's one we'll be confronted with a lot in the future. And I hope that precisely academic experts can help us, because otherwise we won't manage.
Thank you very much. Gerard, do you want to say a word on this?
I have no experience on this topic, but it's certainly worrying to some extent, because let's imagine that we have a perfect screen to detect collusion and competition, and it's based on the prices. So if companies can reverse engineer what we're looking for, then we'll have a big problem, because they will set prices so that our algorithms say, yeah, this is competition. So we need to keep evolving. I don't know what the future holds, but it's interesting for sure. And I don't know, I expect that we will win, but I'm not sure.
Thank you. Martin?
Let's hope you're right. I think everything has been said. I just want to emphasize this point again. If we have these complicated neural networks now, which are also used for pricing, right? Then in a neural network, you don't know actually what the contribution of which part in the neural network is exactly. So even the people who run this algorithm don't know exactly how it works, right? And now the question is, what do we do about this? There's one thing which Manuel already mentioned, namely there's the tendency of explainable AI. So there are tools where you can ex post find out which features in the process were most important to getting to the result or to the price that you have, right? And so we might need to make companies, we might want to hold them accountable for this, so they need to explain it to us. And if they can't, maybe another solution is that they are not allowed to use this algorithm. Because I know from some cases where in some markets, there is now actually in Switzerland one market where actually it is not allowed to use such an algorithm if you don't know how it works, right? If you cannot explain the outcome. But I mean, that's a question. There are always trade-offs, right?
Children shouldn't play with guns.
yeah, exactly.
Adults shouldn't play with guns either.
I mean, there are always trade-offs, right? Whether you want to restrict this or not, it's a hard question. I'm not a legal expert. I'm just saying what the technical problems are here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So indeed, the question is, how are we going to win? Algorithms, I mean, for people who are not dealing directly with this kind of information and whose training is legal or otherwise, in the same way that I will say I'm moved of the belief that what we fix in a decision is the full truth, that the legal truth is the full truth. I think that for ourselves, we also have to be aware that data training is capable of bias. So depending on the data you choose and depending on how you train things, you can obtain decisions or you can, artificial intelligence can be biased depending on the human being that has been training them. That is one thing. Now, when I was preparing this panel, I read many things to be able to cope with understanding what was at stake. And then I saw that there have been some divisions of the stages of artificial intelligence. And the first stage would be the reactive machines, in which the machines don't have a knowledge; they just get the data and then they are able to process them, and they don't have, let's say, an experience of the past. They just produce. And then the latest stage that they say we have not reached is self-aware machines, and we are somewhere in between. Maybe we need to regulate in a way, as you were saying. Yesterday we were in another discussion of whether we would need actually these presumptions or rebuttal presumptions for some of these things, because evolution can go very quickly. In the DMA, even if it is only related to gatekeepers, you have an Article 5.6 in which gatekeepers have to make sure that when they are designing algorithms, they are not having the effect of self-preferencing, for instance. So it is by design. You are taking into account the design. So I don't know. Before I open the floor, because we started a bit later for no, I don't open the floor. Then you are going to sleep on this.
You open the floor, but you have 5 minutes maximum.
Okay, fine. Well, but I will leave you with this that I said the other day, because for me it was a big concern to learn that ChatGPT 4 had been able to lie and to hire a human being to do a job that the bot couldn't do. So what happened is that it was given the task of doing something, and then it got to the barrier of a captcha. This captcha is this thing that you get sometimes to prove that you are not a robot, that they say, look into, which pictures have bicycles in them, and then you have to choose that. And then it gets, I'm not a robot. Okay, so it got to that barrier, and then it decided to call a center where you could hire human beings to do some tasks. And then it asked the human being that took the phone to do that for them. And then this human being, making a joke, asked, but how can't you do this? Wouldn't you be a robot? And then the robot said, and then it was made afterwards to process why it had said that. And then it said, no, I am a a visually impeded, I mean a blind person, and then I cannot get through this. And then it hired the human being to get through. So we have to be alert to these things because biases are possible and lying is possible. And we are far beyond the age in which you could say there should be some commandments for robots that they cannot break because there is a moment where they would make choices. So we have to keep an eye on these developments. One question? Okay, Gonzalo.
So sorry to take the only question, but I was just so stimulated by the debate. It depicts on the latest situation, Martin, on the kind of the requirements for use of machine learning and artificial intelligence, both from the point of view of policy and also from the point of view of ensuring that the use by companies is not detrimental to competition. Is that you talk about knowledge, but knowledge without explanation, it's not knowledge. It's something that we cannot. It's not robust. You cannot show it to someone and base the decision on that. So, how to ensure? The question is how to ensure that we understand what the models are bringing, which might be great, but if we cannot understand it and a third party cannot understand it, even if it's confidential, with the appropriate safeguards, then it will be very difficult both from policy and from companies to really make the best use of these tools.
I think it's for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I see the point. And I must say for the initial machine learning models that we use so far, it's actually not so hard to explain it because usually they are based on a certain limited amount of variables, right, which we call screens. So, for example, the difference between the lowest and second lowest bits and some other things. And then if you see how important each of these screens is actually in a specific problem that you have in a specific data set. And there I would say there it's still sort of easy because there very often it matches very well with the economic theory still, right? So you would say, okay, under collusion I have a reduced variation in prices because people coordinate, so prices do not appear random anymore. But the problem is with these deep learning algorithms, right? And there is actually now a literature in deep learning, as Manuel mentioned it, which is called explainable AI, and ex post, you can then explain what drove the model. It's not always very easy to do so, but in principle it's possible. I try to give you one example. It's completely a different context. So there was an algorithm that was trained to distinguish bedrooms from other rooms in a house. And it was very successful, this algorithm. But one didn't know why. And then what you could do ex post, you could create a heat map, like which parts of the picture triggered the decision of the algorithm. And it was funny to see that it was not the beds in the room, but it was the curtains. So when there was a curtain, that triggered it, right? And so there are tools like this also for other neural networks. And I think this is the direction where we need to advance in the future. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I am following orders from the president of the authority, but we are at your disposal, and in particular they, because they are much more knowledgeable than me about the topic, once we get out of the room. So thank you very much.